Welcome, everybody, back to Cast Revive. This is Steve Monselsi here with my buddy Matt Heimerl.
You know it.
And today we have a very interesting topic. It's a topic that helps you get on the go in video game culture.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Today, this week's topic is all about overworld music and what gets you from point A to point B.
There are so many good tracks. I was so excited when we had the opportunity to do this because there are so many great songs in this list that. But unfortunately, the problem with doing a top 5 we talked about is so many great ones get left out.
That's right.
It always is an exciting time to do this kind of stuff.
Now, what we did was we took RPGs in general, and we kind of went through and thought about over the last week about what our top 5 RPG overworld map screen music is.
Yeah.
And yeah, as Matt mentioned, it really was hard to. I mean, we probably could have had a top 10 and still have been really reaching for what we're going to pick.
Yeah. So basically, yeah, I mean, it says anything when you're, like he said earlier, anything you're traveling from point A to point B, that's what this music is from. It's not town music, anything like that. When you're on the world map or if you're traveling in an airship or anywhere that puts you out going from point A to point B is something we can use.
All right. Well, I think we should go ahead and get right to it and start with your number 5, Matt.
Didn't we start with mine last week?
We did.
So let's start with yours.
All right. We'll do that.
Here we go.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is the overworld music for Ni no Kuni: Wrath of the White Witch for the PS3.
I haven't played it, but I've heard amazing things about this game.
It is. It's actually a very beautiful game as far as the artwork. It's cel-shaded. It's kind of like a Japanime type feel to it. It's by the same directors and stuff like that did the Puyo movies for Disney and things like that.
Cool.
And this game is actually very, very good. It's a very grinding game when you get near the end. But yeah, this is actually a lot better than I ever could have thought it would be.
Isn't this? I thought I read. Isn't this like a remake or a port of a similar game in Japan? Like, wasn't there like a Ni no Kuni Dark Crystal Man or something before
Isn't
this?
Every game a port or remake from a Japanese game?
Well,
I mean, come on, really?
True, but I thought that I read that before. I mean, this one came out it was at PS3, right? This one came out.
This was the PS3 and the Xbox 360. It might have been. I honestly do not know the answer to that question. It might have been. I know there's several games that were in that series, and whether it was a cartoon or an actual game before it came here. But
here we go. Yeah, it was an enhanced version of Ni no Kuni: Dominion of the Dark Djinn, released for the Nintendo DS in Japan.
And there you go.
Knowledge is power, kids.
Yeah, that's right. Stay in school.
So is this anything special about this game that makes it stand apart from other RPGs?
Well, one of the things I really liked is that it kind of married Pokemon and a classic RPG into one, where you have eventually you have your 3 main characters,
right?
And as you fight battles in the wild, you can actually tame. Once you get the girl that's she's like a trainer. You can actually tame the beast every once in a while when you beat them, and then if you tame them, they join you.
Oh, nice.
And then instead of you fighting, you can actually have them fight. Now, of course, you raise their experience, and then kind of like Pokemon, that once you get them to a certain level, you can give them certain food, and that food will actually evolve them into a stronger cousin, shall we say, version of themselves. And of course, there's the ones that are just super powerful right out of the gate.
Right.
They don't evolve, and those are like really hard to find.
Yeah.
And by the time you actually get them, you don't need them because you've already wrecked everything.
Nice.
But, for the collector, it's nice to have everything. And then they have gold versions. Once you beat the game, they actually release gold versions of certain ones that are released in the wild that drop rare items because you have alchemy in this game and everything else, and that you need stuff from them. So, yeah, it's really interesting how they did it.
That is cool.
It takes a little getting used to. But, it comes across real quick.
Nice.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I wanted to check it out. I think our neighbor Brandon actually has it. Maybe I still have a huge backlog. So of games that I want. Oh,
actually, I've had
that's true. You do have it.
I've almost platinumed it. I have to make like 3 more things in my alchemy, and then I would have 100% of that game.
Wow.
Yes, beast mode activated.
You are officially the man of the cast.
Thank you. It's about time. We have it on recording now.
We
admitted it.
The world can hear it. Steve is the man.
All right. Well, speaking of the man, let's go to the next track, which is your number 5.
That it is. Here we go. The Legend of Dragoon for PlayStation 1. My favorite RPG of all time.
You know what's the worst part about Legend of Dragoon?
What's that?
That there's only one.
Yeah, I was reading on it earlier. I was just interested to see, on like reviews, like when it came out, and it didn't get very good reviews. But lately, it's had such a cult following that there's been so many petitions, and I actually went and signed one because I would love to see a sequel or even a prequel.
Well, and that's the problem, with those kinds of games, especially with RPGs. RPGs and first-person shooters, it is so easy to flood the market with those types of things.
Yeah.
And, by the time, a month goes by, 6 RPGs have been released. And, for people who play RPGs, it takes several hours to 100 hours plus to get through one. And by the time you get to, this game came out in like 1998. Here it is, 2015. I'm finally getting around to it. So, it's hard to jump on a lot of things that aren't mainstay.
Yeah.
Games like Final Fantasy, Zelda, those kind of mainstay games. When something new like Legend of Dragoon, people, okay, what's that? And it was very easy to pass over.
Yeah.
Shame on those people who did, because that is one of the best RPGs that was ever released for the PlayStation.
Yeah, I remember I first saw it. I was in Sears, and they had a kiosk set up on it. And I went and I played it, and I was just like, I need this game. I loved the combat system, the addition system that they had, and it was just, I hadn't played anything like it before, and it had an awesome storyline. I loved the characters, and it was hard. It was a hard game, and that's what I really liked about it.
I love that, you can learn abilities and combos and things like that, but they weren't a given.
Yeah.
They weren't like, I hit a button and just sit back and watch it go, Knights of the Round. It was a, go make yourself a sandwich, come back, and they're still beating on something. It was, you had to time your attacks with the reticle thing that came down, and then you had to time it with that, and then the more complicated, more damage it did, the harder and quicker that thing came through.
Yeah.
So it was really difficult to actually chain those moves, and
then sometimes they threw the counter. It turned red, and you had to hit circle, otherwise it would have broken your whole chain.
Right.
So you really had to focus. You had a limited inventory. I think it was like 25 items, so you couldn't just stock up on like 100 high potions, stuff like that. You had the healing breezes, and then you had the magic attacks. So you had to spam. You had the button mash to get that the percentage up. It was so cool. There were so many different elements in it than you normally would see, and your Final Fantasies and Breath of Fire, all the different kind of games, and it was awesome.
What I did love about it though was, even though there was only one, those characters are very memorable.
Yes,
like you get Rose, and you have Dart, and you have all those Lavitz. You got all those guys, and you just remember them, and it was just such a shame that they didn't have a sequel to it. That needs to happen for all those in, those high places that are listening. That needs to happen.
The best is when you connected an addition. You had not that it was horrible voicing, but gust of wind dance.
Yeah.
all the different, different things, all the different. They had, I think, 7 each different editions, and they were hilarious. Hard smack,
Yeah, not enough good things can be said about this game. And like I said, it just goes back to we wish there was more. It's one of those few RPGs I don't mind going back and playing again. I mean, graphics. I don't care that people get all wrapped up in the graphics of a game.
Yeah.
If you go and you base a game strictly off your of the graphics, you're going to be missing out on a world of games, and this is one of them.
Yeah.
The graphics weren't the best in this game, but say another game was Legend of Legaia.
Yeah.
That the graphics were very polygon, and you're like, okay, like very Final Fantasy 7-ish.
Right.
That's another example.
Yeah. Block hands.
Right. You're like, okay, by today's standards.
Yeah.
But by then, when that came out, you're like, wow.
Yeah. But that's the thing, is when you're playing a game like that,
this is the future.
Yeah, I don't even think about it. I just think of the story sucks me in, and it just has, amazing characters, amazing music, amazing setting, and it's just like I don't care if these guys look like squares and walk around. It's just I'm having an amazing time.
And the story was great. It was amazing. But you know what else had a good story that everybody kind of overlooked except for me, because this is actually one of my all-time favorite games.
Oh, yeah.
So here's my number 4. From the overworld to the dungeon music, Zelda 2: The Adventures of Link had some of the best music for the NES.
This game grew on me so much. Before, I didn't really enjoy it, but I played it recently, and I've been watching. I do a lot of speed running. I watch it on Twitch, and I watch a lot of guys who speed run this, and it's easily my second favorite Zelda game now. It's a phenomenal game, and definitely an underappreciated title in the series. That's for sure.
I really don't understand why people hated on it so much. For me, it was great. It took the principles of Zelda, which was an amazing game, and they tried to give it more of a complexity to it, with the different views, being able to see Link instead of just assuming he's just a child because you're always looking down on him,
right?
To from the side to find out he's actually a teenager or mid-adult, and you're like, okay, that's kind of cool, and giving him different abilities like this upward thrust and downward thrust, and giving him magic. And stuff like that.
Giving him a spell called a spell.
There is nothing wrong with that. That guy right now is laughing into his millions, so I don't think he's hurting. But yeah, I mean, that whole game I think was fantastic. And I even though people are like, oh, that's nothing like Zelda, you're right. It's not. And that's kind of the beauty of it.
Yeah.
And I can think of a lot worse Zelda games that are out there than this. So that's why I don't understand why it gets all the
Majora's
heat
Mask.
it does. Yeah, right. Cough. Majora's Mask, Oracle of Seasons wasn't that great. I mean, that was just, Link's Awakening Part 2. I mean, okay, we've done that. But, it's hard to come up with a new concept.
Yeah, it is.
And when you come up with a new concept, you definitely run the risk of being hated on and called a sellout to being one of those. But you know what? That's just the way it is. If you don't like it, don't buy it. It did very well. They wouldn't have spawned 18 more games or so if it didn't. So that's where we're at with that.
No, I agree. I mean, Zelda 2 is if you have played it and you hated it, but you hadn't played it since you were a child, play it again. It will definitely grow on you, and the mechanic stuff you wouldn't have appreciated back then, you may appreciate now and be like, wow, this actually is a fun game. And the exploration in that game, the amount of hidden things, you're not just running around and dropping bombs on random mountainsides and setting bushes on fire. You spend a lot of time in the open world walking around. There's so much to explore, and it's just a fantastic game. And this music definitely gets embedded, and I'm glad you threw that in there. And
you don't have just one old man living in a cave. You actually have towns of people.
Yeah.
And it actually gave that element of depth into the game that wasn't in the original Legend of Zelda. And now, I mean, they've definitely enhanced all of that since then. You know, like anything really, like Ocarina of Time. They have, you know, whole villages you can go and really made it more of a realistic, instead of, you know, Link just shows up in the middle of a cave and some guy gives him a sword, and that's how it starts. You know, they built a story around it, and I think it was fantastic.
Yeah, because in order to get some of the items, you didn't just go to a shop and buy them, or in a dungeon you picked it up. You had to. There was a chain of events you had to do. Talk to a specific person in town. They would come back out of the house, go into their house, and they would give you permission to go down. You know, down to the dungeon and or whatever,
or like
the basement
in the town of Medina, when you had to like learn the jump spell and then jump from a rooftop to rooftop to get up to the top of the church that had a door that you could go in, and if you followed it all the way down, you got the guy who taught you the downward thrust. Yeah, you know, and then you got the raft, and it takes you to a whole nother island, and it may be
on the other side of the map where you actually have to use that to get an item, so you have to backtrack. It's just there's so much to do. It
was the first Zelda game too, being that there's only 2 at the time, but it was the first Zelda game that allowed you to collect experience and actually level Link up and actually gain, you know, become more powerful and do more damage with your attacks, and it really kind of put into place that experience system.
Yeah, it gave you that extra RPG feel. You're actually, you know, crafting your character. You want to be more magic heavy, more attack heavy, depending on what way you wanted to go.
One last note on this game. When I was a kid, I would sit there and power level Link before even going to the first dungeon. So I went in there and like things were maxed out. And it's like you've been playing this game for like 30 hours and haven't done the first thing. You wait.
That's right.
You wait. You go through there and just one hit everything. Yeah. Just wrecking everyone. And it's wonderful. And you could do that. You could do that because it didn't limit you. You know, you were limited only in certain parts where you needed to have a certain weapon to proceed. But the gaps between that were huge. So you could just wander around and
you were praying for those pea bags to drop, so you get this extra experience.
That's right. Pea bags. Yeah, that is a thing.
Yeah,
because words. So yes.
Speaking of pea bags, we're going to go into my number 4. That's right, I went there. Legend of Zelda, Link to the Past, Dark World. Amazing.
What's amazing is going from 8-bit music to 16-bit music.
Yeah, I mean, this
night and day.
This was the next in line, and when I played this game, I was blown away. And going from as much as I now love Zelda 2, but going from that to the Super Nintendo was a world of difference. A world of difference. And this game, in my opinion, is just flawless. I didn't play the new one, the Link Between Worlds. I hadn't played that one yet. But this one, or I didn't play Ocarina of Time. But basically, I didn't play any Zelda after this because there was no point in my eyes. Because nothing's going to top the Zelda game for me.
I do not agree with that.
Well,
he said he's never played Ocarina of Time. So
I've heard horrors of the Water Temple, and I will not be subjecting myself to such anarchy.
So all of his opinions are null and void from this point on.
Yes! I am not the knowledge man on Zelda. I will completely give that. But I think people can agree with me that Link to the Past, even though I haven't played the rest of them, is the best in the series.
I don't think it was the best in the series, in my personal opinion. However, I think it is an amazing game. The fact that it was so huge for its time, because there was 2 different worlds to explore. You had your light side and you had the dark side, and the dark side is what this music is for here. And, I mean, they each had their own labyrinths. Wow, this game's over. Oh, no, it's not. And you're only halfway through.
And in order to get to certain areas, you had to position yourself and then switch over, and you'd be in a different thing would be open. And it's just, oh, my God, the hours that were put into this game.
And 2 things. The first important thing was that if you didn't come over, if you tried to go to the other world and you didn't have that gem, then you would actually come over as a rabbit and you couldn't do anything until you found that thing to protect you from the darkness. But the best part about this game was the fact that this is the first game Link could get killed by chickens. That is right.
That's right.
Go up there, you find a chicken, you stab it once or twice, it looks at you funny, you keep stabbing it, it calls in the cavalry. And chickens coming from everywhere and peck you to death.
Oh, man. There were so many little side things to do in this game, which was great. It wasn't just you're trying to get to the end. There were so many cool interactions you could do and so many areas to explore. And the items were cool. All the items were awesome.
And just the sound effects alone and all the music in the 16-bit age was top-notch for its time. And it really kept you engaged even more so. And it makes you wonder, since all of our podcasts are about video game music, is it the music itself? Like, for example, you take the Adventures of Link that we just listened to, and then this one here for the Dark World. What they both keep you engaged.
Yes.
But what about them keeps you engaged? Is it the tempo? Because if you listen to the Adventures of Link, that's definitely very synthesizer sound. As music progresses, it's starting to sound more symphonic.
Yeah.
And even though it is processed here, it's more symphonic as it goes on, but it keeps you just as engaged as an 8-bit track. Yeah. So is it the quality of the game, the quality of the music? Is it a combination of both?
I think it's a combination of both. I mean, I think depending on what kind of storyline the game has, I think that's what keeps me engaged. Like if you're out and you're doing like an action RPG or, like you want something that I'm walking and strutting myself, and you can feel yourself nodding to as you're going along. You don't want something that's just like real low key. You're just like, all right, if I get into a battle, I'm probably going to start crying. Like I want something, I want something that just it gets you pumped up, and you just because a lot of a lot of time you spend in these games, you spend exploring. So I feel the Overworld theme is probably one of, if not the most important,
I agree,
track in a game.
Between Overworld and the actual battle music. Because that is what you hear 90% of the time.
Yeah. Super important.
I would agree with that.
And this game does.
Okay, that opinion does matter because I agreed with it.
Yes. If Steve agrees with me, then I'm stopping the podcast now. I'm done.
He's moving back up in the ranks. Ocarina of Time.
Speaking of rank rising, let's move on to your number 3.
Number 3 it is.
Oh, yeah. Now, before you say what this is, I'm just going to say that I have never played this game, but after hearing this track, I want to play this game.
Well, okay, if you've never played this game before, Matt, what kind of setting do you think this music implies this game's about?
Western.
Absolutely.
You can tell it right away.
Absolutely. And we've discussed that before about the importance of the music corresponding with the kind of gameplay that you have. And that's exactly what this is. This is Wild Arms for the PS1. It is the first of 5 in the series. This game, for me, was fantastic. It's correct. You have 3 characters, and this does take place in a fictional, futuristic Old West.
I'm sorry. I don't even want to, I think it's such, you hear it, you think, you're just running into the sunset.
You're on a horse.
You have your friends with you. You're just riding a horse and shooting guns in the air. It just sounds awesome.
Would you agree Final Fantasy is set in a future with its weapons and its style, its look, its feel?
I would say all but 9.
Okay, agreed. This is Final Fantasy in the Old West.
Nice.
So it's got that level of gameplay, that level of complexity, but you're in the Old West. And I cannot speak enough good things about this game, too. Another very underrated game. However, they did make 5 of these, whereas they only made 1 Legend of Dragoon. Yeah. But, again, this is for the PS1. It was a time when RPGs were running rampant. Anybody with half of an idea had an RPG out, and it got lost in the shuffle.
Right.
Wild Arms 2 was oddly much more popular than Wild Arms. Don't know why. The one good thing about Wild Arms, except for the very latest one, they all had the same style to it. They all had the same feel for it. If you played one, you played the other ones,
Right.
but they just have a different story. So it wasn't having to relearn an entire way of doing things, and it wasn't having to figure out things all over again. It was the same,
Yeah.
but that made it great. That's because you could jump right in, and you're like, yeah. And what's really cool is that even though the games have nothing to do with each other, they reference each other somewhat.
Right.
So it's really cool how they did all that.
That's really, really cool. Yeah, I'm is it a long game? Would you say it's comparable to other RPGs around that time in terms of length?
You could probably 100% that game in probably 60 to 70 hours tops. It is, and that just depends on how much grinding you want to do.
Right.
But yeah, that game is amazing. It really is.
Nice. It looks awesome. I was watching some video gameplay of it, and yeah, it looks. Is it hard to find? Is it hard to find for PlayStation 1?
In really good condition, it might be, but you could probably pick it up for like $15-20 somewhere on like Amazon or something like that.
Yeah, that's something I'd like to. Oh, it's on PlayStation Network too. You can even download.
There you go.
But I'd rather buy the actual disc. You've got me hooked on collecting, so.
You're welcome.
Yeah, bye money.
Your wife loves me.
Yes. Speaking of love.
Let's show a little bit to your number 3.
It's going to be hard for me to turn this track down. Secret of Mana. Secret of Mana. You're used to being shot out of cannons, and then you get flamey.
Right.
And then your whole world changes. Oh, my God. It's a beautiful track. It's an absolutely beautiful track. I'm tearing up right now just listening to it. It's so
Secret
amazing.
of Mana is one of the holy grails games for the Super NES. That and a handful of others. This game is actually very hard to find, and if you find it, it's very expensive.
I have it in box for the Super Famicom.
That is beautiful.
Yep, it's up top there.
He does.
Right on the
Ladies and gentlemen, I am actually looking at it right now.
Yep.
That is beautiful.
Yep. Instructions, everything. It's all like it's never been used. It's one of my prized possessions that I own.
I love that it says Squaresoft on it. It was after Square, but before Square Enix.
That's right.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful, man. This game was great. This was probably, I want to say, the first RPG that I played. Either that or Breath of Fire. I can't remember. I want to say it was this because I never owned a Super Nintendo, so I had played over my buddy's house. But it was great that you could play with people in
Yes.
Secret of Mana. It wasn't just a single player game. You could play with your friends, and it just you had 3 characters you could play as, and just all the battles were in real time. You weren't taken to a separate screen, so everything was happening. You had to charge up your attacks based on what weapon. You can level up different weapons. They had different attacks, and the magics and the
Sprite.
That's right.
Sprite.
I'm trying to think of the name of it.
I just pulled that name out of I don't know where.
You just said,
boom. Knowledge handed down.
But yeah, you gotta check out Secret of Mana. I'm hoping if you haven't played it, you've at least heard of the game. I own all the games in the Mana series. I have them all.
They had Secret of Mana, and then they did another game that was not popular at all. It was called Secret of Evermore.
Secret of Evermore.
And that game was exact same gameplay, but it was about a boy and his dog, and
which you think would be awesome.
Right. Well, the game, some of the stuff in the game was awesome.
Yeah.
But nobody played it to find out. So, I mean, because, of course, being in the Legend of series, or Secret series, everybody compared it to Secret of Mana, and that was just like, that game was so good that you really had to pull out all the stops to try to beat that, and that just wasn't going to happen.
Here's a little tip. If you want to see what soundtracks, in my opinion, are like remembered and awesome, look up remixes, and you will see a ton of Overclocked Remixes is a website I go to. You'll see a list of just tons of games that have been redone, and Secret of Mana is one of them. It's known for being remixed because it just has such an upbeat, awesome soundtrack that people just want to take clips from it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You want to know something else that's sexy?
Yes, I do.
For the Game Boy, the original Game Boy, they released a Secret of Mana game for it, but they couldn't get the license to call it Secret of Mana, and they changed the title to
Final Fantasy
Adventure. That is correct. Very nice.
Thank you.
As we all know, this is all ad-libbed, so I am actually very surprised that Matt had that knowledge, and that was very awesome.
I like to surprise people. Bam! I'm not just a dude.
Wow.
I'm not just a dude with the equipment. I sometimes know what I'm talking about.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. Well, I guess we'll stop here while we're ahead. We'll move on to your next one. I just want to make an ass of myself. All right, here is your number 2. Wow.
I think everybody's asleep now.
Is it? That brings back memories. Talk about a game of grinding.
This game, Dragon Warrior for the NES, Dragon Quest over in Japan, but Dragon Warrior here in the good old US of A.
Yeah.
This was the game that got me into RPGs. The hours on this, and this game was actually so popular that Nintendo gave you a free copy when setting up a Nintendo Power account.
Really?
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yes. Complete with the box instructions. It wasn't something special. It was the actual game. And this game has, oh my God, there's so many sequels to this. I can't even begin to tell you how many there are. I want to say there's at least 14, 15 different ones that have come out.
And this is the one that has the popular slimes, right?
The slime.
Slimes, yeah.
And this is the game that I really kind of my buddy and I kind of came up with the idea to call monsters cousins, because that's what they were. You started with a green slime, or blue slime, rather, and then you could get the more powerful red slime. And then there was metal slime. And so they were all just the same art,
yeah,
with just a different color, and now it's an entirely more powerful, different creature, and that's all they had in the 8-bit days. So...
Yeah.
You know, it's like, what is this creature? I've never seen it before. Oh, it's a cousin of this. Oh, okay, I know what you're talking about. But it's blue. Gotcha. You know?
Yes.
But yeah, the slime creatures, and believe it or not, a lot of the creatures that were featured in Dragon Warrior series, you find in a lot of places, like the golems and the stone and the gold man golem and things like that. And, you know, they had their special things about each creature, and they had, like, you know, I remember the ultimate weapons was Erdrick's sword, shield, and armor, and they were scattered across the world, and you had to do a bunch of subquests to give you the items to go and find where they were, and some of them were like latitude, longitude for the cave.
Oh, nice.
You had to figure out. Some of them, like, okay, it's behind a bar at such and such town that's been destroyed, so you go there and you find the location and you get attacked, you beat that thing, and you get the piece of gear, and you're like, yes!
See, that's one thing I loved about these original retro RPGs when they came out, is you didn't have internet to find maps. Some of these games would come with maps, and you would be writing down, you know, these locations and what items were in these towns so you could remember it. You didn't, let me look it up real quick, I'll print it out, what's the fastest. But no, like, you literally charted everything. You became a cartographer.
But you never got lost.
It's true.
And to this day, perfect example, the original Legend of Zelda, my brother and I actually took sheets of notebook paper and drew out each screen when we were on it, and then put it all together, and we actually had the full map of Hyrule on notebook paper. Each screen was a sheet of paper. It took up my entire grandmother's living room by the time we were done with this thing, but we had the map.
And I know it's laminated and kept in a secure location, right? But you never would have gotten rid of that, right?
It's in a safety deposit box somewhere, and I can't tell you where.
I want it. Can you redraw it for me?
Done.
Please.
Done.
We'll do that. We'll redraw the map of every Zelda game. You can do Skyward Sword.
No. That's little.
I'll do Wind Waker.
There's not a lot of land in Skyward Sword, isn't it?
All I need is green and blue. That's all I need for Wind Waker.
There you go.
Yes. Oh, that's a good song.
Thank you.
Dragon Warrior.
Dragon Warrior.
Yeah, it doesn't get much more old school than that.
Made by Enix, by the way, before Square bought them. That's why Dragon Warrior games now are Square Enix.
See that?
Yeah.
We're always throwing knowledge at you. Just saying, these guys just talk about music but don't know the history of the game. Wrong.
I will school people.
We should start Jeopardy for video games.
We should.
You'll be my Ken Jennings.
Okay.
The guy who won
I got you. I didn't know who had to make you, and I froze up. And I'm sorry.
Oh, don't make me anybody. I'll be your
Trebek.
Yeah, well, I was gonna do a Rocky reference. Mickey, there we go. I'll be your Mickey.
Oh, what?
From Rocky.
All right.
Yeah.
Tangent. The rapist.
Yes.
Oh, that's therapist.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh.
Move on to number 2. Mine. Oh yeah. If you don't know this track, then shame on you. This is Final Fantasy VII. And this music is perfect for an Overworld theme.
Final Fantasy VII set the bar on so many levels for so many things that it is still... There's been 8 games after it, and it's still the go-to measuring stick.
Yeah. I mean, you think about it. I mean, like we talked about it earlier. I mean, in terms of, the Overworld music, do you think it, is it fitting for what type of gameplay it is and story?
Oh, absolutely.
Like 7 is such a gloomy, it's a depressing game, and it's just
covered with smog and everything else. And,
I mean, it's just this theme is just like when you head out, when you leave Midgar, and you don't even realize there's this whole you think you're spending the whole game in Midgar, and you leave and you have this open world. You're just like, there is so much to take in, and it's just there's so many things going against you. So the music is just it weighs you down, but yet it's got this triumphant feel to I just escaped near death, and so it's got a mix of both. I just think it's perfect.
It's a mix of what you know is less than what you don't know.
I like it.
Which makes perfect sense.
You are the deepest man. Oh God.
Yeah, Final Fantasy VII. We could probably somehow pull Final Fantasy VII into every podcast we ever have going forward, because it really was the measuring stick for a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a lot of people out there who don't enjoy 7 storyline and stuff like that. Well, I mean, okay, well maybe not. Well,
there's 3.
There's 3 in the
I've had
whole
them
world.
killed.
But we all have. I think everybody has to agree that the music in this game is amazing, and I will be referencing it a lot. Final Fantasy music is my favorite out of any gaming series. It always has been, and it always will be, because Uematsu has just all the way back to 3D World Runner on the NES. He does amazing stuff to where he makes you feel like you are there, and there's a lot of emotion attached to his music, and that is so important, for movies and end games. And he just
well, I would dare say, and Matt, feel free to disagree with me, but I don't think you will. Final Fantasy VII soundtrack was the first game to truly give you a scale of epicness.
Yeah.
And when you heard the music, it told a story all on its own.
Yeah.
Not only did Final Fantasy VII have an actual great story, an amazing story, but the music itself could tell the story for what it was.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, it had the right music for every occasion. There are some games that I'll play and I'm like, this music just doesn't fit, but everything fits in this game. It is a perfect soundtrack.
From Escaping Midgard to the Golden Saucer, everything has
Everything.
the perfect music for it.
It does. I mean, and then we mentioned it. On our top 5 themes, you had One Winged Angel in there. The best way to end this epic journey to stop Sephiroth, and that's the music that front with. I mean, you could have gone a million different directions, but this is where you went, and it's just like, yes, this is the closure that I needed for this amazing game. And it blows me away every time I hear it. It never gets old.
It doesn't, and I absolutely agree with you. But I have a number one.
You do?
My number one is very obscure to a lot of people, and that's unfortunate because this is my personal favorite RPG of all time.
I love it.
And this is my number one. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Phantasy Star for the Sega Master System.
Sega Master System, baby. I just recently acquired one of those, and I am so excited about it.
Now, it is not often, I'm sure, that we will be mentioning the Sega Master System on our podcast. There wasn't a whole lot of memorable games for it, but the ones that are memorable for a reason.
Yeah.
And at the time, Phantasy Star was the main RPG series for Sega, as Final Fantasy was the main game for Nintendo.
Right.
Because the sales for Final Fantasy just blew away Dragon Warrior. So it became number one. And funny enough, these games were actually released within a couple months of each other. Final Fantasy 1 for the NES and Phantasy Star with a PH.
How about that?
For the Sega Master System. This game followed Alice and her quest to rid the galaxy of villains. And this game allowed you to acquire 4 different people. One of them was a cat named Mayu. And you could acquire Odin and a female wizard named Noah. And, oh, man. The soundtrack from everything from the overworld map on Palma, you get to travel through 3 different planets. You have the desert planet and you have an ice planet as well, and all of them make the appearances. This game and all of the other Phantasy Stars actually do have the same stories. They're actually, this took place 100, 200 years later. This took place,
right?
So it was like, oh, do you remember when Alice said you go in Phantasy Star 4, and you can find like statues of the characters from Phantasy Star because they're legends. They're, it's such a great game. I believe the main villain was Isaac or something very similar to that. It's been a while since I played it.
Lassic. And there's a lot of Phantasy Star. I see 1, 2, 3, 4. There's collection, and they have online Phantasy Star online games.
What's the first one was for the Sega Dreamcast. Was for Sega, the Final Phantasy Star Online. But what was the best part about Phantasy Star, for those who haven't played it, the game itself, when you're on the overworld and you're in towns, it's an overhead view, very much like Final Fantasy.
Right.
Okay? But as soon as you enter a dungeon, it's first-person perspective. So as you're walking down the hallway, you're walking down the hallway, and cool. You turn left, you have to turn left, and you're walking down the hall, and you find a treasure chest. You open it, could be trapped. I'll open it. Oh, an arrow shot out, and now I'm losing life. That's just wonderful.
Arrow in the knee.
So I'm going to keep walking, and so it's very easy to get lost.
Yeah.
And when you get to like Lassic Stage, which is a huge dungeon that have pitfalls in the dungeon that you can't see until you fall into it.
And you have to remember
and then you remember where it is, and then find the stairs back up, and then thankfully you don't take damage, but some of the stages are just littered with them, so you're just constantly going up and down, up and down, up and down, trying to find your way up there. But that game also culminated in just an amazing fight at the end, and a serious sense of accomplishment once you beat it.
Right. That's awesome. And that's hard to find now, right?
That is the rarest. Well, one of the probably the top 3 rarest of the Sega Master Systems. To find a loose copy isn't so bad, but if you're trying to find the box instructions, good luck. I mean, you're going to be paying at least $100-something for it.
Wow.
That might sound a lot to some people, to others, not so much. But
do you have an inbox with instructions?
I do. I have it? You silly man, you.
Yes, got him.
Yes, I do have it. Box instructions. A good buddy of mine kind of bequeathed it to me when I started collecting, and it's also where I got
You're welcome.
Wasn't you? But I do appreciate the notion.
Yes.
But yeah, Phantasy Star is again because it was. Let's face it, Sega in its entirety was known for its sports games.
Yeah.
And it always has been, probably always will be. I mean, Sega's just, the company of Sega is always just pumping out sports games.
NHL 94.
So when an RPG came out, nobody really cared. You know what I'm saying? It didn't make an impact. Then you had the second one. Well, the second one came out for the Genesis. That started catching people's eye a little bit, and that was actually a really good game. The third one was just god-awful, terrible. Please stay away from the third one if you heed any of my warnings in this show.
That's actually my favorite one.
No, it is not. Don't lie to these people. The third one was weird about it because it had generations. So you had your main character, you're like a couple hours in the game, you get married, you have a kid. That kid grows up, you're now that kid. And then the story continues. And it's just so all over the place, it didn't make sense. But the fourth one was probably the best Phantasy Star in the series because, you had vehicles in the first Phantasy Star. You had a Land Rover for Palma, you had a hovercraft for the desert planet, and then you had an ice digger for the ice world.
Nice.
But in Phantasy Star 4, you could actually drive in them and actually steer them, and you could fight from them.
Oh, nice.
So you run into creatures and like, I have a cannon that I bought for my Land Rover here, and you don't exist anymore now. So
liquefied.
And it just added a new element to that game. And I think I'm going to go home and play that now, actually.
Like that. Put Skyrim away, pop in Phantasy Star.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. And for those who can't find it for the Sega Master System, because you can't, it's hard. If you have the Sega Genesis collection for the PS3 or the Xbox 360, if you play Phantasy Star 1, 2, and 3, I think you have to put an hour into each game or something like that. It will unlock the original Phantasy Star for the Master System, so you can play it on the newer systems.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yep, and it's free. It's just an unlockable, and it's an entire game. So it gives you a reason to go get. And you can pick up that now for $15 tops.
Yeah, I have it. I'm gonna have to try that.
All right. Well, that's all I have to say about Phantasy Star.
That's all I have to say about.
I mean, I could talk a lot more Laconian pots and all other good stuff. Those who have played the game know what I'm talking about.
All three of you.
All three of us. All three of us know what's up.
Cool guy.
But I want to know what's up with your number one.
My number one is awesome. There's a reason why it's number one. But I have an interesting fact about my number one, but I won't say what it is.
You have an interesting fact.
Yes, I know. And
I am excited. I don't think I can wait all the way to the end.
Interesting is bolded and italicized.
Okay, I'm holding my breath.
All right. One of the most beautiful tracks in existence from Chrono Cross. And that interesting fact is I've never actually beaten this game. This track is my number one, and I haven't actually beaten this game yet. That just speaks to the music in this game. I got very close to the end. I had one of those mega memory cards, and it fried. And I never got a chance to re-go through the game. I was so frustrated that I just never picked it back up again.
You want me to frustrate you even a little more?
I would love it.
Okay. Oh, I know you. I know that you do, Matt. The problem with beating this game, great, you beat it.
But,
however,
yep. there's like
for those
1,000 endings.
Yes, for those who have played this game, there's actually about 30 or 40 characters.
I think there's 45 actually. Yeah,
characters that you can get in this game, and you can never get them in one run. So because some of them are based on decisions you make.
Yeah.
So once you beat the game, you can go back and start over, and then go through and make different decisions and get the other characters that you missed. So eventually you can't. There's one character that's actually a skeleton. That the only way you can find him, is to find all the different pieces of him throughout the whole world, and then he reassembles, and now you have another character.
That's awesome.
What?
Yeah.
What?
I remember I always used to get made fun of because I used Pashal, and I think it was Razzie, the fairy.
That's not why he got made fun of.
That was one of the reasons. They're like, why would you use the two worst characters? Dude, I have a dog, and I have a fairy that throws stars at people. Like, it is awesome. Next question. Thank you. I mean, do I really need to explain anything else other than that?
So what you're saying is, why do I use them? Why don't you ask my star-throwing fairy? My level 300 star-throwing fairy.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
That game was actually really, really good. It's not one of my favorites because and simply because they added a level of complexity to that game I personally did not like. It's the same reason I did not like Final Fantasy VIII as much as any of the other ones. The story was fantastic. The game looked beautiful. I didn't like the idea for Final Fantasy VIII that you had to suck out magic from another creature to learn that spell, and then you can only use that spell X amount of times, and then you had to go redraw it from something else.
I loved it.
I didn't. Give me that. Hey, I earned this. I worked up to an experience level. I learned it. Give it to me. Great.
I think the junctioning system in 8, I feel, is the best out of any Final Fantasy. It gave me that level that I could customize this character any way that I wanted. I mean, I could alter his defenses, attacks, just change it on the fly. How powerful or how weak I could distribute it throughout all my characters. I loved it. Because in the other games, just okay, I'm just going to start spewing magic at you and stuff like that. But this game, okay, I don't
see a problem with that.
No, but if I keep using this, I'm lowering my defense and attack. So I need to be cautious about what I'm going to do. And I love that feel. And nothing you say is going to change that.
The feeling for that, as far as Chrono Cross is concerned, is you had spells that had different colors that associated with them.
Yeah.
And then certain, like the last boss, you had to cast spells in a specific pattern and then use like a cross or something like that. As you can tell, I haven't beaten it either. But you have a cross or something like that can only be activated and actually kill the last boss if all the spells were used in a certain pattern.
Right.
And what sucked about it, ladies and gentlemen, is that the boss was also using spells. So if you needed blue, red, and green in that order, and during that time he cast a black, well, now you have to start all over.
Right.
And so, you had to really kind of set purposely stall the boss or any kind of an enemy. And that wasn't just the last guy of the game that did that. A lot of creatures, almost every creature in the game had that ability for it. And it was just, to me, it was like, okay, it added a level of complexity that I didn't think was necessary. The game would have been just as phenomenal as if it didn't have it. Hello, Chrono Trigger.
Yeah.
The game would have been just as phenomenal. They wanted to go something different. For sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Adding a level of complexity just for the sake of adding a level of complexity isn't always the best route to go.
Right.
That's going to push a lot of people away from your product.
Mm-hmm.
It could bring some new ones too, and that's wonderful. I mean, hey, again, they're crying into their millions that I'm making this opinion.
Yeah.
So it's just my own personal opinion. I didn't care for it.
Right. Well, I'm sure a lot of people, feel the same way, and but as a very, very popular game developer, you can't please everybody.
I agree with that.
I'm not actually a game developer, in case people were wondering that.
He's not.
No. I'm awesome developer.
That is true.
VIP
he develops
status.
awesome on a daily basis.
But, I mean, it's got to be hard, though, you think. I mean, making games, you're trying to appeal to people, and you just know that there's people who are just going to flat out hate your system. You're just like, this is innovative, I'm doing something different, people are going to love it. It's like, this is garbage. Why would you like? But it's cool, man.
But the thing is too is that the people, companies that are doing that already have gobs of money that they can make decisions like that, and the ones that don't have successful game series to fall back on, if they, okay, so what? Everybody knows that Chrono Trigger is one of the best games, RPGs for the SNES of all time.
It actually, for GameScore, I think it was, it actually won a perfect rating.
Yep, it is that good.
Rating.
It is that good. Okay, so we have this perfect rating. We know it's obviously perfect. Let's change up a little bit, see where it goes. Oh, people didn't like it? Okay, so we'll make another game that's just like this one.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Oh, we're back on a perfect game.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Do you think developers, not to get off the tangent of music, I'm just curious, do you think that people found it harder then or now to try to do something more innovative?
Now.
You think it's much because of how many things have been done already?
Right, because what's the chances that the thing that you came up with hasn't been done in some capacity before?
But I mean, now, bigger companies, like you said, they have money and stuff and series to fall back on. Whereas back then, they didn't have that library. So was it more of a risk to do it back then, or do you think it's more of a risk now, considering how people are now and people don't really like change?
Well, is it a risk? I think it was more of a risk back then, but I think it's easier then. I mean, that's kind of two different questions. I mean, it was easier to come up with stuff then because there wasn't things like it. You could just do it. And the risk was minimal because, you had stuff to fall back on. But now, I think it's much harder to come up with stuff that's new, fresh, and vibrant. And then if you do, is it so out there because it can't be mainstream because it's been done already?
Right.
Is it so out there that people are going to like it? Look at how many indie games come out for the PSN or, the Xbox store all the time.
Yeah. That
people either love or have never heard of.
Yeah.
And it's just, that's the risk you take. It could take off. It could be something stupid like, Angry Birds. And you're like, oh, that's very simplistic. And wow, it captivated the world by storm. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
Tetris.
Yeah. Tetris is a very good example.
Who knew?
Yeah.
I'm going to put blocks in a line and people are going to go crazy. Man, you're crazy. Oh, okay. Tell that to my bank account here that can't get any more money into it.
We need a new vault.
Well, I think our top 5 for Overworld music,
I think it was awesome.
I
think it was awesome. It's a fun episode, and I like it when when you have trouble making the list because there are so many songs, and there's a certain criteria that I have to follow, and it's very hard to knock some of them out. But.
And there's so many games out there. I mean, there's games that we could have easily put on this list, like Super Mario RPG. There's just so many out there.
We didn't even have any of the Super Marios in there.
So I would love to hear back from some of our fans, and
Absolutely.
if not all of our fans, on what their top 5 are, because they could, what I love about this is when our fans interact with us and they introduce us to a game maybe that we've never heard of or we've never played, because then at least myself, I know for a fact that I go out there and I'm like, all right, I'm going to check this out.
Yeah.
And now it's like, wow, that game is amazing. I'm going to talk about this on the next podcast.
Especially if there are newer indie games, because there are so many coming out that might have amazing soundtracks that I just may never get around to playing or listening to. It's
2015. I'm just now starting to play Skyrim.
Yeah, so that just says where we're at in our backlog.
So we have quite the backlog going. So please send us your information, send us your feedback. We would love to hear from you, and we would love to be able to talk about our fans and their music on our podcast.
Yeah, so follow us on Facebook. You already listened to us on Shout Engine, but leave us your comments. Let us know what you enjoy and what you'd like us to talk about in following episodes, and definitely leave your top 5 because we want to be able to talk about them on the podcast and share your guys' love for music as well as ours. So
well, that's all for us from Cast Revive, and Matt, if you would do us the honors of playing us out, sir.
Yep, this is the Ron Fair theme from Final Fantasy XI. So thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.